Ready? This is the Wednesday, December 3rd, 2025 meeting of the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Energy Advisory Committee. And I'll take the roll. Councillor Cook.
Here.
Tracy Cameron.
Here.
Peter Somsich.
Here.
Tom Rooney. Here. Ben D'Antonio is absent. Fred Calcineri, who joins us, has a concert rehearsal tonight. Kevin Charette's in England at his daughter's wedding.
Oh, wow, exciting.
So
Nice time of year to be over there.
Yeah.
Christmas
And
market.
here's Betsy. I was just calling the roll. All you can do is.
Time is perfect.
Say here.
Memo, like everybody thinks we're great. You're thinking holiday.
Let's see what is down here. Okay. Just a few top of the meeting remarks. We're going to second reading with our ordinance to make this committee permanent, which is exciting. And some of you have put 3-4 years of work into this. If you don't want to continue on, please let me know. But we'd love all of you to continue on. And I think we've got a nice diversity of backgrounds and a lot of expertise in the committee. I hope we can keep that going forward. If possible, we'll both do second and third readings on meeting on December 8th. If not, we'll finalize that December 22nd. Why we're having a meeting Christmas week, I don't know. We have some minutes to approve. Has everyone had a chance to read those? Any changes or emendations? Welcome a motion.
Go ahead.
I motion that we approve both the October 1st and the November 5th minutes.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Great. And I'm excited tonight, as I'm sure many of you are, to hear from Peter Rice. And Peter, can you introduce?
Sure, and then I should have had the opportunity to amend the agenda to make it clear that Christine Spovero, our project manager for this effort, will be speaking tonight. She's more on top of this than I am. I have read, some of the stuff that's been generated and participating, but Christine is point person on this. So Christine will be speaking to this mostly. So
Yes, and I think you were with us once before when we
Yes, I was. I'm not sure when, but
I think we were talking about the status of the permit on the landfill and
yes.
monitoring.
And the gentleman from, was it Exeter?
Yes,
Was here to speak as well. So, yeah.
Dave Sharples. So tell us about the Jones Avenue Solar Project and what's up.
Sure, great. So we solicited quotes from 5 vendors and ultimately went with a company called Apex Analytical. We choose based on qualification and price. So far, they've done an initial review of the site's solar potential. So their preliminary model suggests we could install a system up to 2.45 megawatts. That would generate about 3 gigawatt hours of electricity each year. The estimated cost for that system would be around $4 million, but again, it's very preliminary, so it's a rough estimate. And with that price, it would be a simple payback period of roughly 10 years. The estimate does assume that the system connects to the 3-phase power line on Jones Ave. There is currently a hosting capacity of 3 to 5 megawatts, so it would be a relatively easy connect into the system. And a phase build out scenario with the option to add capacity later is also being evaluated right now. As an alternative option, they evaluated connecting behind the meter, so directly into the high school. That approach would require about 2,000 feet of conductor from the site and would have to go through the woods. And that would be more than twice the amount of conductor needed to get to Jones Ave. And that would obviously add a significant amount of cost. In addition, any excess energy, and I might be misspeaking on this, but it sounds like once the energy is exported from the high school, the credit would be at a lower rate per Eversource's net metering rules compared to feeding directly into the grid. So Apex is currently reviewing the high school's energy usage to determine if connecting that way is the best option. At this point, the city is also evaluating several ownership models, including bonding to own the system, entering to a power purchase agreement, leasing the land, using net metering, or purchasing a hybrid or community solar approach as well. Right now, it does look like a bond to own is the best option, but they're working to refine that. So currently, I wanted to speak to the tax incentives. I'm sure everyone's wondering about that. So to qualify for that, the system would need to be in service by December 31st of 2027. Or construction would need to begin within the 12 months of the One Big Beautiful Act being passed. So the interconnection reviews for the system larger than 1 megawatt typically takes 16 to 24 months. So that timeline might not align with the incentives deadlines. My little spiel. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Questions for Judy?
Yes, so there are some options if it's behind the meter, like you said, that's different from if we're connecting directly. I think the rules are different for both options.
Yes.
Was there also consideration given to battery storage?
No, there was not. Great question.
Because especially if it's behind the meter, you might want to make sure that you know where to store something if you can't put it somewhere else.
Right, yeah. The idea would be, once it gets transferred to the high school, it would be, put back into the grid, I believe.
Yeah, we tied to the Lafayette circuit. So the two circuit, you have the Jones Ave circuit and then you have Lafayette circuit.
Mhm.
So the excess would dump into the Lafayette circuit.
It's circuit,
So
okay,
it'd be net metered through
so
that.
it'd be something, no, all right.
The idea would be to offset, municipal
Okay.
building, energy usage.
And if it was not behind the meter, it would be what, directly connected then?
Yeah, so I'm not 100% sure. I'm confusing it with the community power solar program. But it appears to be that there's a higher, you can offset municipal consumption directly by metering, so that the value of what we spend on municipal buildings would be offset, and maybe you guys better understand that. But that's how we're interpreting it at this point. So Apex, they haven't completed their study yet. There's a number of things that need to be looked at in addition to what they've done. The landfill impacts and how to address that, the costs associated with that have not been added to the numbers yet. And the idea of battery, I think that's a great suggestion. Obviously there's additional costs associated with it, especially with a commercial battery. But it's worth exploring and seeing, what do the numbers show.
I just had a question on the existing array that we have at the high school. Is there room for expansion of that existing array on site at the high school? I don't know what that building's capability is as far as holding additional. I know there was additional roof space, but I don't know if, as far as weight goes, how much that building can support.
Off the top of my head, I don't recall. We had EEI do an evaluation of all the municipal buildings, and they looked at that, and the high school is not one of the ones that they were recommending for additional solar array. But I don't know why that was, why they didn't incorporate that, whether it was because it already had a solar array on it. to the extent that they felt they could do that. But that's something that we can look into.
I'm just asking because it seems like, if we can send the power back into the grid at Jones Avenue, but still expand the array at the high school, then we're getting even more solar.
Sure.
And I realize that that's not the same project, but it's maybe an additional project we can consider down the road.
I wonder if it's the strength of the roof, like, is that consistent across the big sprawling structure of the high school, or is only some of the roof capable of handling the weight of like a ballasted panel system or? Oh, Stephanie.
Bricks.
Yeah, we'd need to do a structural evaluation to determine if that was the case.
Yeah,
So,
that's usually the limiting factor. There's also a lot of parking lot space there too. It's not great to put solar on top of structural steel for price, but that might be an option too. I like where you're going with that, Kate. I am also confused about the net metering difference between high school versus Jones Ave. That'll be
So
important to get clarification.
my understanding is it's not net metering when you're tied directly into the line. So you're not behind the meter, you're going directly into the transmission line.
Yeah.
So that's the difference.
But wait, they should be the same, though. It-
Not this, what we're being, and I don't understand it completely, but it's what I'm being told is that if you can get municipal buildings can get offset directly by tying, if you tie in, you can agree to do a direct offset. But I don't know, maybe you guys know something about that or.
Yeah, Jackson Aspire, Director of Member Services for CNH. I believe that there's possibilities to group net meter under both scenarios. If you have, excess energy you're dumping into the grid, whether it's behind the meter system or your front of meter and your direct tie-in, I believe that either of those could qualify for municipal-based group net metering. In terms of the compensation rate, I would need to clarify if there are any differences there. I don't want to speak off the top of my head, but I think both are.
So
We
the
could get,
utility won't pay the demand charge for solar that's provided to the grid. I think that maybe that's the difference. Like if you were,
delivery charge or the peak
no,
demand charge that.
I'm gonna mess this up. I also need to check too, but like I think New Hampshire is unique in that what the utility pays you for that power isn't tied to time of use, like
No.
when demand rates are high. So if you're taking solar during expensive periods, like peak periods, you are essentially reducing the most expensive part of your electricity bill. Whereas if you're just dumping it onto Jones Ave and not drawing down any power, you're just selling it back, PSNH will benefit, or whoever's, getting that power will benefit from it coming in and them getting to distribute it during those peak times. You don't get paid a different rate. So I think maybe that's the,
Well, we'll ask Apex for a brief description and we can forward that to the committee so that they
Yeah.
have some clarification.
I think what we learned from Exeter's example was the municipality just gets a giant credit. The power flows into the grid. Eversource says, thank you very much, and we'll give you a reduction in your municipal bill. That's the revenue.
That's how it's described, but whether it's discounted or whether it's a flat rate, whether the peaking factor associated with it.
yeah, you're just pulling down less power during peak time. So you're being charged less, and that's a premium rate. I think that might be the difference, but I feel like where you were going, Counselor, with could we just maximize, if there's an opportunity to maximize the rooftop space there, it probably would make more sense to just leverage the Jones Ave infrastructure and, try to do both.
Sure. This study is not to do that.
I know, I
The
don't.
study looks at Jones Ave.
Can't just fit that in too.
We're looking at, in our mind, we're trying to, come up with the most cost-effective approach to do this. And if the
Yeah.
payback is not what I would recommend, typically if it's less than 10 years, it's something that I think is reasonable.
Yeah,
But if you're pushing 15, 20 years and then it starts to become challenging. So,
I was surprised our initial estimates were 1.3 megawatts. Are they looking at,
So it's AC versus DC. The 245 is a DC. So if you adjust that to AC, it's like 1.7.
are we still looking at primarily the capped landfill within the fence, or are we looking at more land than that?
It's within the fenced area.
So we could still have the recreational benefit outside the fence.
Yeah.
Okay, that's important.
So one other thing to consider perhaps, and because I can see this as a long-term thing. It's not gonna happen anytime quickly, especially with what's happening in Washington. But while we're looking at these things, I think one thing worth looking at is some type of a microgrid for the municipality, where we can tie in some of these different sources into the critically functioning infrastructure of the municipality to say, okay, if we're going to be doing all these connections, is there some way we can kind of protect our infrastructure here locally by tying it in a microgrid that could be separated from the main grid when it's needed in case of a power outage or whatever for emergency purposes? And that could include something like the hospital too, you know. So it might be worthwhile thinking about that somehow also as a possibility. And of course, we have an expert in microgrids right here, Tom, whose company does this professionally. So
access to
we're lucky to have him here.
How would that work, Tom?
Well, it would be it's quite a bit more expensive than
Yes,
on a solar array. And generally you would need some plant within the microgrid that is like a base plant. So like a CHP is a good option.
well, would the landfill installation be something?
This solar wouldn't really.
Solar that wouldn't count for that?
No.
Okay,
So it's possible. We looked at one in Durham. It's just. It's a
UNH thing or what?
yeah, it was UNH and the town were
Yep.
looking at kind of including,
Methane.
and you would
gas?
definitely want to include the hospital. So it's something. It's interesting, but it's quite a bit larger than.
Okay, so if the solar installation would not qualify, then we wouldn't have any local source to depend on unless we create some kind of new power generation. So-
Well, right, just think if we island did the municipality, we need to get that power from somewhere, right? And you'd need more.
Yeah.
So the solar array could be part of it.
Yeah,
So you
okay,
just
but
need
it's not
something.
alone, it wouldn't be enough at all.
Right, yeah.
Okay,
So then you
sense.
definitely need battery storage, which
yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's
I was gonna add.
So would, for example, offshore wind qualify for that? If it came about, we don't even know that.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
that
that's
could be
close
your,
enough to us, maybe remotely. I don't, okay. I just thought maybe in the process of looking at these things, if we can plan to be able to do things in the future that
Mhm.
may not be doable now, it's worth considering, you
yeah,
know, that as we go along. Since right now, there's not a big push out of Washington to do some of these things that need to be done.
So our
Go ahead.
our direction is to Apex is how can we make this happen without worrying about the incentives from Washington?
Yeah.
Because I've spoken to power generation folks and they're saying that you don't need the incentives to make solar work.
Right.
Because it's,
Right.
it's cost effective, you can do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and why, I don't wanna tie the city to a schedule that's driven by capricious, I shouldn't say that in that way, but
Yeah.
something that's just less
Yeah.
than predictable.
yes, and we'd have to have shovels in the
Yeah,
ground
yeah.
by summer of 27.
Yeah, and currently we don't have the funding. We don't have the definition of what the landfill requirements are gonna be. So we don't have the report completed, so we really can't start the procurement process until we have some of those things nailed down.
Yeah, and I think it's
And a
just,
firm recommendation to how we're gonna fund this.
yes, yeah.
Well, I think the bigger picture too is that we could race to meet those deadlines in hopes that we were going to get assistance in funding it, and then the funding could be pulled away afterwards.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's not a reliable source.
And my concern is I want to make sure we do due diligence and doing the evaluation, make sure we're doing the right,
Yep.
you know, right decision.
Tom, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, so that you said roughly 10-year payback,
Yes.
and that doesn't include any.
That's without the incentive.
Yeah, okay.
Betsy?
Can you just remind me the interconnect study, that's a necessary part of this, that's not included within their scope, right? That's
No, it
outside
is
of
included
it.
with their
It
scope.
is.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we have for information on Jones and then the initial information about the high school, that's like the first step in all of this. So, okay, great, awesome.
And their initial cut, right, they thought that the capacity was available in the circuits so that it wasn't, they thought it was
That's what
gonna
you're
be
saying, yeah.
provable.
Yeah, it's amazing. Who knew?
So,
That's great.
We knew there was three-phase power there, but
Yeah,
that's a lot of capacity. Just delightfully simple, really.
yeah.
When you look at they're saying preliminary numbers show that we could bond and pay this off. Is that including the sale of renewable energy credits?
I
'Cause
would need to look into that, but I would assume so.
the market's heating up for those. Surprisingly.
That would be good to see and to see how they forecast the price for Rex too, because that's very much an art right now. Yeah, I think that would be really interesting to see.
When you talk about what the landfill requirements would be, any mitigation we have to do to protect the cap? Sorry.
Yes, so it depends on how you anchor the panels, so ballast presumably, it's better not to pierce it, but that would need to be explored. Currently, they're looking into that, as part of the study. So the permit may need to be revised, so we'd have to work with the state for that. And also a geotechnical investigation just for weight bearing capacity is also need to be done, so that's really.
But that's part of their scope of work as well.
Yeah, right.
Of course, good news is that this has been done in other places in New Hampshire before. So we're not breaking any new ground here except our own.
I
And
don't want to break any ground on it.
Yeah.
right, that's it.
Yes, and there have been a lot of municipalities that have used simple rock ballast
Yeah, that seems to be the.
to sit on top of the grass.
Yeah.
There's not another resource with the landfill in terms of gas, is there, when we were talking about combined heat and power? It just made me think of like in Durham, how they get so much energy from the Rochester landfill. Like this is too small of a space to like actually capture any landfill gas for.
It's an ash landfill, so it was a open burn facility. So it
Okay.
wasn't a high organic content, so you don't get any gas production, you don't get gas production out of it.
Got you, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, they don't see the pipe, there's no vent pipe.
There are a couple vent pipes out there, but it's negligible. It's an ash
Like you're just
it's an ash landfill.
To be safe, yeah.
Yeah, they're there for monitoring.
Yeah.
Very, very minimal hits.
I had a resident ask me, we have to do more maintenance of the site, mowing, caretaking.
Yes. Oh, we've neglected the fence line for a number of years. We've done some work recently.
We walked that.
Yeah, yeah, so it's, it was out of sight, out of mind and, but we've been working last years, so to reset fence lines, cut back the trees, get the brush cleared off. So that's, you know, that's a big part of it.
Would we not assume that if there's factors there that there's gonna be like less growth underneath it to maintain?
So when you say growth,
Well, is there,
oh yeah, you'd have to mow and,
but you have to mow it now too, right?
Correct.
yes,
But if
mow with a
there's
big tractor.
factors over it, then
It's
there's gonna be
easier.
less growth, there's less sun getting to the ground.
It probably wouldn't stifle it that much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions?
So they're mid-study, is that correct?
Yeah, we asked them just for a quick synopsis of where they were at so we could report back to you all, but there's still a lot of stuff that they need to do.
Right.
So, I mean, some of the questions that we heard from you all was better description of what the net metering versus the direct connect. So we get that.
Mhm.
What's your pro forma? What, you know, what's included for tax, what's included in the pro forma, whether the tax credits and whatnot, so you guys can better understand that as well, so.
Renewable energy credits, yeah, the sale of renewable energy credits, if
Yeah.
that's included versus not, and how they forecast that.
Yep.
How they forecast the increase in energy price, to get the simple payback. Jean, what's their timeline for completion?
For the feasibility study?
Yeah,
We're expecting March.
nice, okay, so they've got time. It's really exciting, thank you,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
So our next steps are to finish up the study, and as part of that, we'll have pro formas for owning versus power purchase versus leasing.
As it stands now, the CIP has identified it as a power purchase agreement.
I just, let's encourage them to get us back, hopefully by March, responses so that we can modify the CIP if we need to. In time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you'd have the ability to do that up until May. So,
Lots of last minute requests that come up.
Yeah. I just have it in my mind. I know how this happens and sometimes
lot
then
of-
things get delayed a little bit and
A lot
then,
of needs jostling for.
yeah.
yeah, I'll mention it to Nathan, that there's interest in that, and we'll be able to say, okay, what does that mean to the debt service?
Thank you.
Yeah, and would the pro forma show the net number each year? In other words, what the bond service is, what the savings are on the municipal bill, and any renewable energy credit sales are, what's the net each year? Because it may be that we're carrying a bond, but net at the end of the day, it's a very small expense, or, you know, and then when the bond is finished, it goes positive. So, great. Did they look at an option where a developer puts the capital in, but we buy it after 6 or 7 years? Have you seen
That was one of the scenarios they were gonna look at.
Well, it'd be great to know all those. I'm sure they'll work on both. So
Yes, they are.
very exciting. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
See y'all, happy holidays.
Ahead.
Good evening.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.
If any of you have follow-up questions, just send them to me or to Jillian. And we'll forward those. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Next we have, Jackson and Andrew were here to answer our questions in October. And, that was an in-depth discussion as the minutes showed. But some questions I think Jackson wanted to take another whack at, so. He asked that, he have a chance to come back with Andrew, and so welcome Jackson Kaspari and Andrew Hatch from the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we appreciate the invitation to come back and talk to the committee. It's really exciting to hear about the solar project you all are working on. That seems like a great effort, so I'll be interested in following that as it progresses. Real quick comment on that, CPCNH is a REC aggregator, so we could purchase RECs from a project like that, which would serve community power programs, including Portsmouth, and would be a sort of nice connection to your local program. And we've been able to pay 95% market value with very little overhead, so the pricing's been pretty strong. It's currently $35 a REC for Class 2 solar RECs. We are seeing prices drop off slightly, mostly due to a change in rules in Connecticut that did impact the volume of RECs compared with demand. So be sure to follow sort of how pricing structure changes over time, but we'd always be happy to have a more in-depth conversation about that side of things at some point if you'd like. So Andrew and I are back here tonight as you teed up to have some further discussion with you all. There were a number of questions that we felt that we could provide some more information on, given a little bit of additional research on our end. So if you'd like, I'm happy to sort of just dive into some of those answers, and then that might spur on some additional discussion.
Yeah, I think Kevin, who's not here tonight, was with Eversource customer service. So his experience in Massachusetts was he was very concerned about supply companies, primarily brokers in Massachusetts, who would promise you'd save money and then flip. They wouldn't tell people. And I think in Massachusetts, I think Maura Healy got on him about that. So he was concerned.
Yeah, and that's something we can absolutely talk to. So I'll just start by saying that there were some questions cost allocation and benefits reports that we were about to unveil shortly thereafter. We now have 2 of those available through our website and a third one. Those can all be found under our documents library on our .gov website. And I would encourage folks, if you're interested in taking a look at Portsmouth's figures, it's very detailed reporting, by far the most detailed program specific reporting we've ever done. And it goes through all the various costs and revenues categories. And you can see, month over month breakdowns there, and some nice sort of automated charts that populate showing net margin and things of that nature. So happy to follow up with a direct link if that's useful. I wanted to bring that up. There was also additional discussion regarding the hiring of a finance director as well. And I wanted to let the committee know that we have actually moved that up in our proposed operating budget for April timeframe. So we're looking at April timeframe to try to get a finance director on board. And that will definitely be a very useful position for the coalition. So I'm excited to see that myself. Furthermore, we did get a chance, Andrew's very good about this, to review some of the materials from your last meeting that we were not at in November, and saw there were some comments about accessibility of board of director related materials. Those are available on our website in 2 places. They're really easy to find. We post them every month. We comply with all the right to know inquiries of the public agency. So you can go and find those through our public meetings calendar. That's probably the easiest tool to use. You click on the board of directors meeting, that will bring you to an agenda that has all the materials directly linked within it. So that's one way you can access them. Second way is through, again, I mentioned that documents library we have. We store archived materials, minutes, things of that nature within that documents library. So those are both available as soon as we can make them available. Furthermore, to talk about the question regarding the environmental disclosure label that you had. I know we had the chance to connect before this meeting, which was productive. But just to recap, there was a question as to why Eversource's ED label was showing 13% for renewable content versus CPCNH at about 18% for our Granite Basic product. The reason for that was to do with the fact that Eversource paid a much higher alternative compliance payment. So they're allowed to pay into a fund for the state in place of actually acquiring different classes of renewable energy certificates to comply with the renewable portfolio standard. And so CPCNH goes out and we get RECs through our aggregation program. We get RECs through different, broker-based acquisitions as well. And so we strive to meet the RPS through paying very little or none into the ACP and actually acquiring all those RECs. And we were able to do that, whereas Eversource did pay a fairly high ACP. Therefore, on their ED label, they're going to show that lower percentage of actual renewable content versus CPCNH. So there's more behind it than that, but that's the shorthand explanation of the differential there.
So they basically
take a pause.
buy their way out of having to have the higher percentage of green content.
That's one way to put it. Yeah, I mean, they're allowed to through the rules to pay into, the ACP, which used to go to more renewable energy based fund. Now I believe it just offsets the general fund, but I don't want to speak with 100% on that. Andrew. Yeah, that's the case. No.
So Jackson, if I'm not mistaken though, Ben, who was here last time, was saying that Eversource's difference may also have to do with the fact that they're no longer buying biofuel in their listing. The biofuel component is 0. And it used to be 7% or something like that.
Yeah,
So
that could be
that could
one
be a
of the
big difference
reasons.
too.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the RPS sets the amount of the different classes of resources that are obviously required each year. And I can't speak specifically to their biofuel purchases versus not. I just know, the ACP differential that I mentioned.
Well, what may have happened, they bought ACP credits so that they could offset the biofuel.
Yes,
Which they thought was costlier, because that's why they buy them. When one fuel is costlier, they go with the ACP because that's cheaper.
Sure.
So then all of a sudden in the listing, it can't list biofuel anymore. They don't buy it. And that's why it would drop. But what you and I were talking about on the phone together is that that's one reason why maybe the Community Power Coalition should advertise the fact that our renewable energy percentage is higher than Eversource, even at the basic level. After all, that's what, 5% more?
Yeah, it is a
And
substantial
that is
difference on the ED.
that is something you can market to people and say, hey, we're trying our best not only to keep your prices down, we're trying our best to have renewable energy content as high as possible. And unlike Eversource, which previously we were matching their numbers, now we're not matching it, we're actually exceeding it.
Yes, that is the case this time around.
A marketable point.
Well, yeah, it's a road that has some jeopardy in terms of it's an extremely complex and arcane conversation. You've experienced toing and froing, and for every positive argument there could be some pushback. And I don't dispute the viewpoint, but it's difficult. What we choose to do is to not focus so much on meeting our own obligation under the RPS in the state, but look to what we're doing differently from the utilities by offering higher levels of renewable opt-up content. And in those cases, and as we said when we saw you a couple of months ago, we have met or exceeded what we state as our Granite plus 33%, our Granite, our Clean 50 and Clean 100, that and it's so much simpler. And in our own filing, we make it extremely clear that for those higher levels of renewables, we have not only exceeded our obligation, but we've kept it extremely straightforward. We buy recs that only help New England and preferably New Hampshire renewable energy development over just meeting an obligation, so on the one hand, you've got the utilities that are doing it because they have to for compliance. We're choosing to also address the spirit of the renewable portfolio standard and to really drive the development of renewable energy in the state. And I think that's where we put our effort into marketing, rather than getting into a sort of a little bit of a difficult.
I don't quite
dispute-
understand your hesitancy there. I mean, you guys are making the same claim about all the renewable energy content for the higher levels. You say you're doing this, and people want to know, the energy source I'm getting, how much of that is renewable energy content? And Eversource tells you it's this much. We say it's something different. Why not? Why is the basic, why is the argument different when it comes to the basic level versus the higher levels then? I mean, it's all about buying RECs somewhere and getting them here. So obviously, when Eversource abandons some of those sources and just pays alternative payments, that is less support for renewables.
Nothing you've said is incorrect. I'm just saying that the differentiation we've chosen to take is banging the drum loudly about consumer choice and focusing on what we choose to do, rather than perhaps casting aspersions on how others meet their obligations in a questionable but certainly legitimate manner. I don't think your points are not well taken. It's just a matter of teasing it out.
I don't see why, in the previous years, we're marketing ourselves as being cheaper than Eversource, right? We say we're always going to be underneath them, and now we're above them. Okay, so that's a disadvantage, obviously. So now here we have a situation with the renewable energy content where they are lower than we are, and you're saying let's not highlight that. Why?
Because it's a difficult argument to tease out for the general public to absorb. And you received that information in your bill.
You mean Eversource?
Yeah, from Eversource. Yeah. And you picked out that.
But nobody knows about the alternative compliance payments except the insiders who deal with this. The ordinary public doesn't know anything about this. So just in the same vein, they just want to know, okay, they say they have 13%, you guys have 18%. Right. That's all they need to know.
But we're all meant to have 25.2, aren't we? 25.2 is the RPS.
That's the stake.
Well, exactly. And then we have to say, well,
we're not obligated to
energy, then gives everybody a free pass on certain
classes. But you just said we're not obligated to meet that. We try to exceed it, right? But their Eversource is obligated to meet that.
Portfolio standard, our higher levels of renewable. It's, I guess we would never disagree with what your position is. We're just being cautious that if you can overcomplicate things and confuse, whereas we can take a very separate position on what we do in addition to the basic meeting compliance. Because whenever I get into this conversation with folks about retroactive settlement through the Department of Energy, most people are glazing over. And
yes, sure.
And it almost gets to the point of, oh, this whole thing is a sham. And I don't want people to think that in its pure form, the renewable energy certificate market is a sham. It is abused, but we're not in the abusing business, and we can stand alone and I think come out looking particularly good in terms of the customer choice argument. But I don't want to disagree with what you have to say. We were trying to be responsive to a very difficult conversation, even with informed folks like yourself. It's a tough one to lay all the cards out on the table and keep it clear.
Doesn't it have the potential to change rate period to rate period?
It does.
Yeah.
So it's volatile.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, you have a 5-point advantage. That could flip.
Could change. Yeah.
Yeah. And it should always be even or you know, I don't know, but yeah. Even or better, I would say on our side, but yeah, it's true.
So that's the percentage of renewables. What other questions?
Yeah, so there was a question about, Kevin had asked about any marketing that could happen to like an LMI customer base. And so we did explore the electric assistant program indicators as a field. That is not something that any of the utilities are required to provide us under the PUC rules. But we did go back and ask Eversource and others if it's something they would be willing to provide. And the response from Eversource, which is somewhat typical to our experience, is they're not required to provide it. It's sensitive customer information, and IT changes are costly to implement, and therefore they weren't necessarily inclined to provide us with that data. I will say on our end, while we weren't necessarily surprised to get that response, we've had great success working with local energy committees, working with councils on, promoting information through community-based organizations, trying to reach, different populations through assistance in that manner. And I would recommend that as an avenue for Portsmouth or anyone that wanted to reach a specific target population. We also certainly don't want to be seen as necessarily singling out customers, but anyway, I guess that's my response at this time. I did also, because I was curious, look to see where the housing authority's supply was in Portsmouth, and it is with another competitive supplier, so it is not being impacted by community power rates at this point, one way or another. So,
Okay.
that was the answer for that one.
Yeah, I think that would be probably, I'm guessing, the lion's share of people on electric assistance programs.
Yeah, again, I can't say for certain because we don't have the information, but yeah.
Is that a takeaway for us though, with our connections with that
Each.
organization? Yeah. To have a conversation about the opportunity there. And, or if there's an opportunity, how locked in they are with another supplier.
Yeah, I think that could be a conversation for sure.
So
Yes, Pete.
while you guys are here, let me ask you about Solar 2.0, which I keep asking. Are people who are in Solar 2.0 now eligible to be part of Portsmouth Community Power? No, still not.
Still,
And I thought that's an issue that you're also dealing with Eversource about.
yeah, we've continued
Has been
to
going on for at least 2 years now.
long time, yes, and we're aware that is a priority. And I think I mentioned last time, we're coordinating a multi-pronged campaign to engage small generators, solar customers across New Hampshire, all of our member communities, to try to create a true movement and some pressure to move the ball forward so we can get to a place where we're not jeopardizing current net metering folks, but are moving towards a smarter energy future where we can actually compensate people more fairly for the energy to provide to the local grid. So definitely something we hear not just from you, but from others as well, and are spending time and resources on trying to address.
Is that problem connected also with the issue of solar rec sweeping? Which is when the utility basically claims solar recs for people who have not registered to sell them themselves. So Eversource is allowed, I believe, the only utility in the country that's allowed to claim unclaimed recs from customers without telling the customer that we are using your recs to comply with state regulations, but we're not compensating you, and we're not even telling you that you were doing that because you didn't register them for
Yeah.
recs.
Rec sweeping is definitely a bit of a.
And I wondered if
questionable-
that's connected with their reluctance to get involved in the 2.0 thing.
Yeah, I don't know that the two are inherently related, but I will say that, you should be right to have some concern over rec sweeping, and that's another conversation that comes up occasionally. But no, I don't think that,
Okay.
I don't see that being directly related to the barriers for what we call load reduction, which would allow us to, direct purchase from folks that are putting energy back on the grid.
As rec aggregators, I think there's an interesting opportunity there. So I generate recs too from my solar system, and I purposefully called up the broker who sells my recs to say right after we had our system, like I know my solar developer set this up as a part of the financing, but we own the array. Like I don't wanna sell these things. I wanna own my own recs and not, and they were like, you could do that, absolutely, and your recs will be swept by PSNH or Eversource, sorry. And so I would still sell them, but it's just because I don't want them to be free to the utility. But in essence, I don't want anybody to have credit for it. I want to generate more demand for solar. So I think like as a rec aggregator and community power, these things could come together in that, we want to, those of us that generate solar and want it to be used for the good of community power
Sure.
might have an opportunity and not get kind of shoveled into these two options right now, forced to sell it
Mm.
on an open market for nothing meaningful money wise.
My understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the rules are that the rep sweeping only happens if you don't sign up with a aggregator.
Right,
Now, the aggregator can make sure that you get a minted certificate, but then you can tell them, I don't want you to send it to auction. You can
Yeah.
take the certificate and nail it on your wall every month or whenever you get it and say, hey, I'm retiring these.
That's what
They're
we-
not being
that's what
sold.
we do.
So that's why that prevents rec sweeping. They can't do that if you do that, because now you own your certificate,
I don't,
even though you're not selling it.
this is definitely an in the weeds conversation. It
Okay.
didn't feel as clean, and maybe that's just because of
Okay.
the number of recs that I generate
Yeah.
to be able to do that. But yeah, the idea that they can be swept is really disconcerting. And it would be nice to provide a clear path and just like, I have my own recs on the wall and got nothing for it. Instead, we can contribute to lower cost renewable energy in our communities.
Yeah, well, CPCNH can buy them and hopefully they
Yeah.
apply to New Hampshire projects.
Yeah, or just the fact that we're trying to create a pool of money at some point, right, where you guys can fund projects in our communities. And I would love to be a contributor to that. I don't need to make money off of my recs. I want to create more demand for solar, so.
Sure thing.
Donate your recs.
Yeah, donate for retirement.
Totally. Yeah,
Maybe that's a community solar fund.
yeah,
You could use that money
exactly.
for.
Interesting.
I don't know how many of us it would take to be appreciable, but two potential contributors right here, right?
I
It was
think,
interesting. I was presenting at a town that has not yet taken even the first step as a municipality to join the coalition or engage in community power. But the energy committee were very motivated, and I was presenting there, and I hadn't even sat down. He said, I'm already signed up to your rec aggregation. He was all into it and on it, and he saw the value immediately that we were doing the right thing for the right reasons with
Awesome.
recs and retiring them.
I think there was a webinar that Brian Kalman did a year and a half ago. And one of the issues, Peter, was that Eversource wanted to, rather than give individuals the credit for their solar, just dump a big credit back to CPCNH. Which, would apply, spread it like peanut butter over a piece of bread, but you wouldn't get your.
Yeah, which is not fair.
Mm-hmm.
Folks that go the extra mile.
Right, and
Yeah.
Eversource was kind of digging in their heels and saying, well, this is how we want to do it. So that was an issue.
I would say that just so everybody's aware, on Friday morning from 10 to 11:30, we normally have office hour information sessions, but this one is a special one for the legislative briefing for the next session, and it's an hour and a half. And Jackson and Dina Dennis, our Regulatory Legislative Affairs Director, will be presenting and providing an insight into what we're hoping to achieve.
I'm more emceeing than presenting, so I'll be there.
And
But I agree
what
with
is this?
It's from 10 to 11:30.
And what?
Yeah, it's a legislative preview for the upcoming session.
Zoom or?
Yep, on Zoom. You can access that again through our public calendar that's posted. You do have to register at this point, but we'll take registrations up till the hour before. But yeah, it should be a really good in-depth conversation, and we'll be talking about certainly some of these issues there, so.
Because I think, this is one of the platforms that was, and I think you correctly said very early on, very much embraced by many of our early adopters, and expectations were set that we could really move the needle, but it's proven to be much harder and there's a lot more resistance than we at first thought, but it remains front and center of our strategy. Obviously, there's some serious headwinds at the moment. Yesterday, we were just talking about how do you sort of pivot and talk to people with a completely different view of energy, but still have move forward and not just be characterized as those people over there that we don't talk to. And that's very much what our, regulatory group are doing, is they're building bridges, making connections with folks and making sure that we remain at the table while some conversations continue, and remain part of the conversation and part of the solution.
Other questions for Jackson and Andrew?
You said some communities have given information about the rate changes and where they may. Do you have any examples, or do you know specific communities that have done that? Just trying to think how we might that message out.
Well, so we have a new system for direct communication. I think I brought up last time that is really what's being promoted now more than anything else, which is where individuals can sign up for rate announcements directly from us. And that's taking some of the burden off of communities having to do all the spreading of the message themselves, right? When someone can get something right in their inbox. In terms of, leveraging CBOs, there's been a lot of success of municipalities working with their local library in many cases, which isn't really a CBO, but they're a lot of times connected to different organizations that utilize that space. And it's a good opportunity to be able to post information and make it available. Andrew, I don't know if you have any on the top of your head.
Well, obviously, it all depends on the size of the community. Some are very much more, very, very local. In a city such as Portsmouth, I would say, that is a great point of entry. We were talking when we were coming over about other cities and how they've outreached and used connections. These are some of the places that have maybe groups who have, immigrant communities, English as a second language communities. I know that Concord used the Catholic Charities because they were a very important part of the outreach to there, and just make sure everybody was dialed in so that, you amplify this messaging by having, an old telephone tree, and get the word out like that. But as Jackson said, I would reiterate, as I said when we were last here, your page that we manage on your behalf has been significantly improved since the last year or so, where we it's easier to access, and at all points, if folks are able to access through the internet, they can sign up for this direct information. It's not going to meet all needs of all folks, and we're very sensitive to the fact that we don't need to assume that if you don't or can't or are not predisposed to accessing things on the internet, that you should be shut out from this. So that's why we have our call center and recommend that people call with any question. And indeed, if they were interested in, rates and they pick the phone up, they would be helped by our customer service folks.
We are looking at rolling out more active like SMS alerts as well. So if someone had a valid, cell phone, that would be another way to get information too.
I've seen this on your website now. It's not letting me subscribe though.
So,
I've had
right,
an SMS number in the international standard format. I've tried it 5 different ways. I don't know how many ways you can write your phone number, but that might be a barrier.
Okay, I will double check that. I think if it was just the 1603,
yeah, should be, but
I had to do a +1,
oh, plus 1603, yeah.
603, yeah, even though
I'll
there's
get
a
that
American
removed.
flag next to it.
that's probably a widget that somebody
No,
put in.
it's
that-
totally
Yeah,
widget,
okay. But thank you. Again, we often.
And this is the feedback that
Yeah.
we're like.
But going back to the, the homepage and in many places within the Community Power website itself and your dedicated site, it's the messaging, sign up for rate announcements, we want to make sure that people can proactively opt in and we get that information out instantaneously to the broadest cross section. We're pleased to report that, in our outreach efforts, we now have many thousands of people that receive those notifications. And we want to continue to look to our member community groups to continue that, to advocate for that.
Just another marketing advantage, I think, that you guys have just indicated is the fact that nationwide now, the current coming out of Washington is anti-renewables, more fossil fuels. And if people want to go the other way, we are a group that does that. So if you might not be able to change everything in Washington or your legislator, but you can take that step on your own to put your weight in the direction of renewables instead of what's happening with a lot of trends coming out of the mainstream politicians towards fossil fuels. So.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you guys for your perseverance.
Yeah, you're most
Come
welcome.
back and
Thank
your
you.
questions.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Of course.
Happy holidays. Thank
Yeah,
you. very
you
much.
do.
Yeah, Merry Christmas.
See you in the new year, I have.
Drive safely.
Two last items. See if there's any public comment. We discussed a year-end report to the city council. I bestirred myself to write a one-page draft. I put in and did you all have any feedback? I'm happy to, I'd leave any important accomplishments out. Good.
Only thing I think was I was listed, this was the document in which you had what we all do.
No,
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 okay,
no.
sorry.
yes.
Mine was like 14 years out of date. So I would have only had that edit, but I think we did actually cover that at the last meeting.
Yeah, that's
That's
the
the meeting,
minutes.
yeah.
But it's probably a good idea to put everybody's name in that report.
Yes.
Yeah. So
It'll probably go to the packet of the. One second.
Mine is listed as may need correction, so I can add
Needs
something.
work.
I don't disagree that I need correction.
No, not at all.
Um,
Yeah, if you can just email me your current title,
Sure.
be great. And then I heard from NREL. He gave me the final
Mhm.
report. It went through peer review. Within the packet. No.
great.
Yeah, I think they did a great job.
Mhm.
And it'd be a tough political hill to climb to get 120-foot high tower windmill on Pierce Island. Yeah, certainly with two counselors here from the south end. And the payback was, Peter used a 10-year payback. We didn't. So we looked at adding solar, even at Pierce Island up it's not strong enough. So, but the Pease wastewater treatment plant and solar there had an enticing payback. Something that we can continue for. So I wanted everybody to have that, and I wanted that in the public record now that it's been peer reviewed and it's official. And if only Herb were here.
Yeah. Well, John, I just want to say, it's, you never know how long NREL is going to be able to do these kind of things. Before their director gets fired and somebody replaces them and they say, hey, you guys are doing too much renewables.
Well,
Yeah,
and
this might be one of the last reports they issued that's kind of objective.
They renamed, and it's not NREL anymore.
Is it? What is it?
It's
Oh, yeah, so,
it's like the National Lab of the Rockies or something,
well, this is still,
just a couple days ago.
oh, a couple of days ago,
Yeah,
National Lab in the Rockies.
of the Rock.
Of the Rockies.
Again, it's something.
Okay, I didn't know that, yeah.
yes, and the whole program to do free studies and analyses for communities was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. So
Ah, yeah, okay, so it's like the last time we can get it for free.
some good work for free while it lasted.
Thanks to her.
Anybody on Zoom for public comment?
I'm not public comment. Hi, sorry, I had to be a little late today, but I don't have any additional comments.
Glad. Nice to have you with us. Anything else for the good of the effort? Yes, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you all for letting me be here as part of your committee for the last 4 years. It's been wonderful to be part of a committee where there's so many incredible experts who know much more about the material we're covering, the concepts than we could possibly hope to assemble at City Hall. So it's really been an honor to serve this committee. This is my last committee meeting with the committee, but I'm really excited to support the motion moving forward to make this a permanent committee because I think that the city needs it. And I will continue to support your work over the next few years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your time and help.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? None? We'll adjourn.
Do we need a motion or anything?
Second.
Second. All in favor? We'll see you in January.
Oh,
I won't see you guys until April.
Oh, you're going to
I'm
France?
going to France for the winter, so I'm sorry that the meetings are at a time where I can't join remotely, but I do read the meeting notes and I'll continue to send comments in, so.
Good.
There's a cold there. It's cold
It's
here, right?
warmer there, like our valley, we get as